What would you do if you received a letter from someone you abandoned years after they died? Picture this: a man who once had everything, mansions, private jets, millions in the bank, now sits alone in an empty apartment, clutching a yellowed envelope. His hands are shaking. Inside that envelope is a letter from his mother, a mother he refused to visit, a mother who died calling his name. But here's the twist that will shake you to your core. That letter doesn't just contain her final words, it contains a secret buried beneath an old mango tree, a secret that will destroy him and rebuild him. This is the story of Kweku, the billionaire who forgot where he came from, the son who thought money could silence the voice of guilt, and the devastating truth that waited for him in his mother's last words. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about success, family, and the price we pay when we turn our backs on those who loved us first. They say when a child forgets the hands that once fed him, even the gods turn their faces away. And when a man builds a mansion on the tears of his mother, those walls, no matter how high, will never keep out the voice that calls his name in the night. Let me take you to a village in West Africa where red dust coats your feet and the sun bakes the earth until it cracks like old leather. This is where Kweku's story begins. Not in the boardrooms of glass towers, not in the pages of business magazines, but in a small clay hut with a leaking roof and a single photograph hanging on the wall. That photograph showed a young man in a graduation gown, his smile bright enough to power the entire village. That young man was Kweku, the first person in his family's history to hold a university degree, the pride of his lineage, the answer to his mother's prayers. But on the night our story truly begins, that same mother, Adisa, sat alone by the doorway of her hut. The rain fell without mercy, pounding the zinc roof like angry fists. She coughed into her worn wrapper, deep, wet coughs that shook her fragile frame. The clay floor was cold beneath her knees, and her breath came in broken, painful waves. She was dying, and she was alone. Well, not entirely alone. She had that photograph. She had the flickering clay lamp casting shadows on the walls. And she had her memories, memories of a boy with dust on his feet and stars in his eyes, a boy she had sacrificed everything for. Ah, my son, she whispered to the darkness, her voice barely audible over the rain. Do you still remember me? 5 years. It had been 5 years since Kweko had come home. 5 years since she had felt his embrace or heard his laughter echo through the village. 5 long years of waiting, hoping, praying that one day he would remember the woman who gave him everything. But Kweku was far away that night, far beyond the hills and rivers, in a city where lights never dimmed and money flowed like water. He sat in his mansion overlooking the glittering skyline, a palace of glass walls and golden chandeliers, surrounded by a fleet of cars that shone brighter than the moon itself. He had become what every young man dreamed of becoming, a billionaire, the kind who shook hands with presidents and spoke on television about vision and disruption and building the future, the kind whose name appeared in headlines with words like genius and unstoppable. Yet that night, as thunder cracked over the city and lightning split the sky, Kweku could not sleep. He poured himself another glass of expensive wine, trying to drown out the faint whisper that kept rising in his mind like smoke from a dying fire. It was a woman's voice, soft but persistent. My son, never forget where you came from. He turned up the music instead, louder, louder, until the bass shook the windows and the voice disappeared beneath the noise. Back in the village, Adisa's condition worsened with each passing hour. The neighbors had done what they could, brought her soup, sat with her in the evenings, whispered prayers over her trembling body. But she refused their suggestions to send word to the city to demand that her son come home. He will come, she said, with a certainty that broke their hearts. My Kweku will come. His son does not forget his mother. But Kweku never did come. And to understand why, we must go back to the beginning, back to the day everything changed. Kweku's father died when the boy was only 12 years old. A sickness swept through the village that year, one of those mysterious illnesses that steals the breath from your lungs and drains the life from your eyes. They tried everything: herbs from the medicine man, prayers at the church, even a trip to the distant hospital, where doctors looked at them with pity and shook their heads. It cost everything they had, every last coin. When Kweku's father finally closed his eyes for the last time, Adisa found herself a widow with a bright young son and absolutely nothing to her name. The other villagers expected her to remarry, to find another man who could provide for her and the boy. But Adisa had seen something in her son's eyes: a hunger, not for food, but for knowledge, for something more than the endless cycle of planting and harvesting, of living and dying within the same red dust borders that had contained her own parents and their parents before them. My son will be different, she told anyone who would listen. He will not spend his life breaking his back in the fields. He will wear a suit. He will shake hands with important people. He will make our family name mean something. And so she sacrificed. Oh, how she sacrificed. First, she sold her jewelry, the gold earrings her own mother had given her, the bracelet she wore on her wedding day. Then the goats, which had provided milk for their morning tea. Then the small plot of land her husband had left behind, the only real wealth their family had ever possessed. All of it went to pay for Kweku's education. Every morning before dawn, while her son slept, Adisa would prepare roasted plantains over an open fire. She would load them into a large basin, balance it on her head, and walk 5 miles to the main road where cars passed. There, under the brutal sun or the punishing rain, she would sell her plantains to travelers. Her back bent, her feet cracked and bled. Her fingers grew dark with soot and permanently roughened from the work. But she never complained, not once. Every night when she returned home with barely enough money to buy rice for the dinner, she would kneel beside Kweku's sleeping mat and whisper a prayer over him. May your dreams be bigger than your hunger, and your heart stronger than your pride. Kweku had always been clever, too clever, some villagers said, with a mixture of pride and suspicion. He devoured his textbooks like a starving man at a feast. He won competitions. Teachers traveled from other schools just to meet the brilliant boy from the small village. When he was 16, a miracle happened. He won a full scholarship to study at the university in the capital city. The entire village celebrated. They slaughtered a goat, played drums, and danced until their feet ached. Adisa wept with joy, her weathered face glowing with the happiness she had not felt since her husband was alive. You see, she told her neighbors, I told you my son was special. He will do great things. He will never forget where he came from. But the city has a way of changing people. The bright lights can blind you to the stars you once navigated by. The noise can drown out the voices that used to guide you home. Kweku arrived at the university, a wide-eyed boy from a village with no electricity, thrust into a world of computers and coffee shops and young people who wore designer clothes like it was nothing. At first, he felt like an imposter. His accent was different. His clothes were second hand. His lunch was whatever he could afford from the cheapest street vendor. But Kweku was smart, dangerously smart. Within a year, he had topped his class. Within 2 years, professors were recommending him for prestigious internships. By his third year, he had started a small tech company with borrowed money and a laptop he'd won in a competition. And that's when the transformation truly began. Success came quickly. His company developed a mobile app that solved a problem millions of people faced. Investors noticed. Money poured in. By the time Kweku graduated, he was no longer the village boy with dust on his feet. He was an entrepreneur, a rising star, a young man with his eyes fixed firmly on the future. He bought his first car, nothing fancy, just something to get him around the city, but it might as well have been a spaceship compared to what anyone in his village owned. He rented a small apartment in a nice neighborhood. He wore suits tailored to fit his lean frame, and slowly, imperceptibly, the village began to fade from his mind. Adisa noticed the change during his visits home, which became less and less frequent. Where he once ran to embrace her the moment he arrived, now he stepped carefully, as if afraid the red dust might stain his expensive shoes. Where he once sat with her for hours, listening to her stories and eating her simple food with genuine pleasure, now he checked his phone constantly, his mind clearly elsewhere. My son, she said to him during what would be his last visit for many years, remember that no matter how high a tree grows, its roots remain in the ground. Kweku had smiled and nodded, but his eyes were already looking past her, toward the horizon, toward the future he was building without her. When he got his first major contract, a deal worth more money than the entire village would see in a decade, Adisa sold her last wrapper, the one she had been saving for her own burial, to buy him a new suit for the signing ceremony. She sent it to him with a note. Walk tall, my son, but always remember who held your hand when you were learning to walk. Kweku wore the suit. He signed the contract. His picture appeared in newspapers, but he never wrote back to thank her. The years passed. His second company became even more successful than the first, then a third, then a fourth. He was written about in business magazines with titles like Africa's Next Billionaire and The Entrepreneur Who Came From Nothing. From nothing. The irony of that phrase never seemed to occur to anyone, as if he had sprung fully formed from the earth, with no mother who sowed plantains in the sun, no woman who went hungry so he could eat, no hands that washed his clothes and combed his hair and held him when he cried. Adisa would read these articles whenever someone brought them to the village. She could barely read, but she would trace her fingers over her son's photograph, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, and whisper, I am proud, so proud. But pride is a cold comfort when you're alone at night, coughing blood into a rag, with no one to hold your hand. The phone call came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Kweku was in a boardroom on the 42nd floor of a glass tower, surrounded by foreign investors in expensive suits. They were discussing a merger that would push his net worth past the $1 billion mark. His phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. His cousin from the village. He declined the call. She called again and again. Finally, annoyed, he excused himself and stepped outside. What is it? He asked, his tone sharp with impatience. Kweku! His cousin's voice was tight with distress. It's your mother. She's very sick. She's been coughing up blood. The medicine man says, take her to the hospital. Kweku interrupted. I'll send money. How much do you need? That's not Kweku. She wants to see you. She's asking for you. She keeps saying your name in her sleep. Something twisted in Kweku's chest, something that felt almost like pain. But he had learned to push such feelings away. They were distractions, weaknesses. I'm in the middle of important negotiations, he said. I'll come when I can. For now, just take her to the best hospital. Money is not an issue. But Kweku, I said I'll handle it. I have to go. He hung up before she could say anything else. When he returned to the boardroom, one of the investors asked if everything was all right. Kweku flashed his trademark smile, the one that had charmed investors and journalists alike, and said, just some family matters, nothing important. That night, he transferred a generous sum of money to his cousin's account, enough to pay for private hospital care, the best doctors, whatever was needed. In his mind, this was more than enough. This was him being a good son. After all, what else could a mother want but to know her child was successful and capable of taking care of things? But money cannot sit beside a sick bed and hold a trembling hand. Money cannot whisper comfort in the dark hours of the night. Money cannot look into frightened eyes and say, I'm here. You're not alone. Weeks turned into months. Kweku's cousin called several more times, each message increasingly desperate. She's getting worse. The doctors say there's nothing more they can do. She won't eat. She just stares at your photograph. Each time, Kweku sent more money. Each time, he promised to visit soon. Each time, something came up. An investor meeting in London, a conference in Dubai, a crucial negotiation that simply could not be rescheduled. His assistant learned to filter the calls from the village. They were distractions, Kweku explained. He needed to stay focused on building his empire. His mother would understand. She had always wanted him to be successful, hadn't she? This was what she had sacrificed for. She would be proud. But late at night, when the parties ended and the investors went home, when Kweku lay alone in his king-sized bed in his mansion in the sky, he would hear it again. That whisper, that voice from far away. My son, do you still remember me? He would order another bottle of wine, turn on the television, call one of the women whose numbers filled his phone, anything to silence that voice. Back in the village, Adiza grew weaker by the day. She no longer had the strength to walk to the well, so a small girl from the neighborhood helped her fetch water. She couldn't cook her own meals anymore, so the neighbors took turns bringing her soup and fufu, but she refused to leave her hut. My son is coming, she would tell them. I must be here when he arrives. He won't know where to find me otherwise. The village head's wife, Mama said, would sit with her in the evenings, fanning her and wiping the sweat from her forehead. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and red, Adiza grasped Mama Sade's hand with surprising strength. Mama Sade, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I need you to help me. I must write a letter to my son. But my hands, they shake too much. Mama Sade's eyes filled with tears. Rest, my sister. You can write when you are stronger. No. Adisa's grip tightened. It must be now. I feel I feel my time growing short, and there are things he must know, things I must tell him before I go. And so, on a morning when the cock crowed and dew still clung to the grass, Mama Sad sat beside Adisa's bed with paper and pen. What followed took nearly an hour. Adisa would speak a few words, then pause to catch her breath, sometimes coughing so violently that Mama Sade feared she would not survive to finish. But she persisted. Every word was chosen carefully, delivered with the last fragments of her strength. When she finally finished, she made Mama Sad read it back to her twice to ensure every word was exactly as she intended. Seal it, Adisa instructed, and promise me that if I do not see him before I close my eyes, you will give this to him. Make sure it finds him, even if it takes years. He must read these words. Mama Sade promised through her tears. That was the last letter Adisa would ever write. 3 days later, as the moon rose full and bright over the village, she took her final breath. The neighbors said she died with a smile on her face, as if she had finally been reunited with someone she loved. The news reached Kweku while he was in Dubai, attending a luxury conference at a seven-star hotel. He was scheduled to give a keynote speech on scaling your business to billions in less than an hour. His assistant approached him quietly during the pre event cocktail reception. Sir, she said, her voice gentle, I just received a call from Nigeria. It's about your mother. Kweku took a sip of his champagne. What about her? Did she need more money for treatment? His assistant's face was pained. Sir, she's passed away. I'm so sorry. The glass slipped from Kweku's fingers. For one eternal moment, the world stopped spinning. The laughter around him faded to silence. The clinking of glasses, the buzz of conversation, the soft music, all of it disappeared into a void. Then, just as quickly, the noise rushed back in. Kweku bent to pick up the broken glass, his hands moving automatically. When? He asked. 2 days ago. The funeral is planned for this weekend. They've been trying to reach you, but handle it, Kweku said, his voice flat. Send whatever money they need for the funeral. Make it generous. I want her to have the best send off. His assistant hesitated. Sir, perhaps you should. I said, handle it. His tone was sharp enough to cut. I have a speech to give. 500 people are waiting to hear me talk about success. I can't let them down. That night, Kweku delivered his speech flawlessly. He talked about perseverance, about never giving up on your dreams, about the importance of focus and determination. The audience gave him a standing ovation. But when he returned to his hotel room and caught sight of himself in the mirror, he saw something that made him freeze. For just a moment, he didn't recognize the man staring back at him. The expensive suit, the diamond watch, the perfectly styled hair, it all belonged to a stranger. He tried to pray. The words wouldn't come. He tried to cry. His eyes remained dry, as if all the tears had turned to stone inside him. Kweku did not attend his mother's funeral. He told himself it was too far, too complicated, too disruptive to his schedule. He told himself she would understand. He told himself that sending money was enough. He had paid for everything after all. The best coffin, a proper church service, food for every villager who attended. But what he couldn't tell himself, what he refused to acknowledge even in his darkest moments, was the truth. He was afraid. Afraid of facing what he had become. Afraid of seeing the judgment in his neighbor's eyes. Afraid of standing before his mother's body and realizing what he had lost. The years that followed should have been Kweku's golden age. His companies grew larger, his investments multiplied. Forbes magazine put him on their cover with the headline, Africa's youngest self made billionaire. But something had changed inside him. The success that once felt intoxicating now felt hollow. The parties that used to thrill him now bored him. The women who pursued him seemed interested only in his wealth. The friends who surrounded him would disappear the moment his attention or his money was no longer available. At night, the dreams began. Always the same dream. His mother sitting by the doorway of her hut, looking at him with those soft, sad eyes. In the dream, she never spoke. She just looked at him, waiting. And then she would smile. A smile that broke his heart and fade away like smoke. He would wake drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, and reach for his phone to distract himself. But the feeling never quite went away. It sat in his chest like a stone, growing heavier with each passing month. Kweku tried to fill the void. He bought another mansion, then another. He purchased a private jet. He dated supermodels and actresses. He threw parties so lavish that they were written about in gossip columns. But the emptiness only grew. And then, fate or karma or divine justice, depending on what you believe, came knocking at his door. It started with a newspaper headline, Corruption Scandal Rocks Billionaire's Empire. One of Kweku's business partners had been caught embezzling millions. The investigation spread like wildfire, reaching into every corner of his business operations. Tax authorities froze his accounts. Government officials, who had once smiled and shaken his hand, now looked at him with suspicion. Business partners who had sworn loyalty suddenly couldn't remember his phone number. Within 6 months, everything he had built began to crumble. Lawsuits piled up. Investors pulled out. His companies, once worth billions, were sold off piece by piece to pay debts and legal fees. The press that had once celebrated him now tore him apart. From a row to zero, one headline read, "The fall of Africa's billionaire," declared another. His fair weather friends vanished like morning mist. The women stopped calling. The invitations to exclusive events dried up. Kweku, who had once been able to buy anything he wanted, now struggled to pay his legal bills. He was forced to sell his mansions, then his cars, then his art collection, eventually, even his private jet. One by one, every symbol of his success was stripped away. By the time the legal battles finally settled, Kweku was left with almost nothing. A small apartment in a modest neighborhood, a fraction of his former wealth, just enough to live on if he was careful, and the suffocating weight of his own regrets. He sat alone one evening in that small apartment, surrounded by boxes of the few possessions he had left. The view from his window showed not a glittering skyline, but a simple street where ordinary people went about their ordinary lives. In one of those boxes, he found an old photograph. It was the same one that had hung on the wall of his mother's hut. Him in his graduation gown, smiling with genuine joy, his mother standing beside him with tears of pride streaming down her face. He stared at that photograph for hours, his thumb tracing the outline of his mother's face. For the first time since her death, something cracked inside him. The stone that had formed around his heart began to break apart, and he wept, deep, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. Years of suppressed grief and guilt came pouring out. He cried for his mother, for the time he had wasted, for the love he had taken for granted. "Mama," he whispered to the photograph, "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." 3 days later, there was a knock on Kweku's door. When he opened it, he found an old man standing there, stooped, gray haired, his clothes worn but clean. There was something familiar about his face, but Kweku couldn't quite place it. "Are you Kweku?" the old man asked. "Son of Adisa?" Kweku's throat tightened. "Yes, yes, I am." The man reached into a worn canvas bag and brought out a small, yellowed envelope. The paper was fragile, the edges slightly torn. "Your mother gave this to me before she died," the man said softly. "I am the village head. She made me promise to deliver it to you personally. She said I should give it to you if you ever return to the village, or—" He paused, his eyes full of kindness and sadness. "Or if life ever brought you low enough to remember her." Kweku's hands trembled as he took the envelope. He stared at it for a long moment, afraid of what it might contain. The old man placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She loved you until her last breath," he said. "Whatever is in that letter, remember that." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Kweku standing in the doorway, clutching the final message from the mother he had abandoned. Kweku closed the door and sat down on his worn couch. He held the envelope in his hands, feeling its weight, so light, yet somehow impossibly heavy. Minutes passed, maybe hours. He couldn't bring himself to open it. What right did he have to read her final words? What forgiveness could possibly exist for what he had done? But eventually, with hands that shook so badly he could barely tear the seal, he opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, written in shaky handwriting that grew worse toward the bottom, as if the writer had been fighting against time itself. He began to read. My beloved son, if you are reading this, it means my time on this earth has ended. Do not grieve for me. I have lived long enough to see the boy I raised become a man of great strength and intelligence. But, my child, I must tell you something that weighs on my heart. A man's wealth is not measured by what he owns, but by the hearts he keeps warm. I watched you grow rich, and I was proud, but I also watched you grow distant, and my soul ached. I do not write this to make you feel guilt. Guilt is a chain that binds us to the past. I write this to set you free. Forgive yourself, my son. Forgive yourself for being human, for making mistakes, for getting lost in the brightness of the world. And forgive me too if I ever failed you, if my sacrifices felt like burdens, if my love felt like pressure. The path to peace lies not in gold, but in gratitude, not in what you achieve, but in what you remember. There is one more thing, my child. Beneath the old mango tree behind our hut, I buried a box. In it is something you left behind long ago. Go there, dig it up. Inside, you will find what you need to begin again. I love you, Kweku. I loved you from the moment you took your first breath until the moment I took my last. And wherever I am now, I am still loving you. Let that love be a light in your darkness, not a weight on your shoulders. Walk tall, my son, but this time walk home. Your mother, Adisa. Kweku read the letter 3 times, then four, then five. Each word was like a key unlocking a door he had sealed shut years ago. Tears fell onto the paper, smudging some of the ink, but he couldn't stop reading. When he finally set the letter down, he knew what he had to do. The journey back to the village took 2 days. Kweku took a bus, the first time he had ridden public transportation in over a decade. He sat squashed between a woman with a basket of vegetables and a young man listening to music on a crackling radio. As the city gave way to smaller towns and the paved roads turned to dirt paths, Kweku felt something shifting inside him. Each mile brought back memories he had tried to bury. The smell of red earth after rain, the sight of women carrying water on their heads, the sound of children laughing as they played with old tires and sticks. He hadn't been to the village in 12 years. When he finally arrived, everything looked smaller than he remembered, and yet somehow more real, more alive. People stared as he walked through. Some recognized him, the once proud son who had become too important for his own home. But there was no anger in their eyes, only sadness and something that looked almost like pity. Kweku walked straight to his mother's hut, or what remained of it. The roof had partially collapsed. The walls were cracked and weathered. Weeds grew through the doorway. But the mango tree, the old mango tree his grandfather had planted, still stood, tall and strong and green, its branches spreading like protective arms over the ruined home. Kweku fell to his knees beneath that tree. For a long time, he just sat there, letting the weight of everything wash over him. Then, with hands that had forgotten how to dig in dirt, he began to excavate. The earth was soft, as if it had been waiting for him. 6 inches down, his fingers hit something solid. He dug faster, his heart pounding. Finally, he pulled out a small wooden box, its surface covered in dust and dirt. His hand shook as he opened it. Inside was a small cloth pouch tied with a faded string, and beneath it, a piece of paper protected by a plastic covering. He opened the pouch first. Inside were coins, old, rusty, worthless, maybe 20 of them in total. He stared at them in confusion. Then he unfolded the protected paper and read, My son, these are the coins I saved to buy your first school book. Do you remember? You were 6 years old and you cried because all the other children had books except you. I had sold everything we owned to pay for your father's funeral. We had nothing, but I could not bear to see you cry. So I saved these coins one at a time. I would go without lunch. I would walk instead of taking the bus. Each coin was a small sacrifice, a seed planted for your future. It took me 3 months to save enough. When I finally bought that book and placed it in your hands, you looked at me like I had given you the whole world. I kept these coins all these years to remind myself even the smallest sacrifice made with love can build a great destiny. If you ever lose your way, my son, if you ever forget who you are, come back to this tree. Come back to these coins. They hold the roots of everything you became. You are not the money you made. You are not the business you built. You are the boy who cried over a book, the boy who dreamed under this tree, the boy who promised his mother he would never forget where he came from. Come back to that boy, Kweku. He's still inside you, waiting. Kweku's vision blurred with tears. He clutched those worthless coins to his chest and sobbed like a child. All the grief he had locked away, all the guilt he had tried to bury, all the love he had refused to acknowledge, it all came pouring out. He buried his face in the dirt beneath the tree, pressing his forehead to the ground where his mother had once walked. Mama, he whispered, forgive me. Please, God, forgive me. I forgot. I forgot everything that mattered. He stayed there until the sun began to set, until his tears soaked into the earth, until he had no more words left to say. When he finally stood, something fundamental had changed. The emptiness that had haunted him was gone. In its place was something different. Not happiness, not yet, but purpose, clarity, the quiet strength that comes only from surrender and acceptance. Kweku did not leave the village that day, or the next, or the one after that. He stayed. He rebuilt his mother's hut with his own hands, replacing the roof, patching the walls, painting them the bright blue she had always loved. He planted flowers in the yard. He repaired the well that provided water for that section of the village. With what money he had left, he started something small, a scholarship fund for children whose parents couldn't afford school fees, a small clinic for mothers who needed medical care, a library, just 3 rooms in a renovated building, filled with books for children who cried because they had none. He named it Adisa's Legacy. Word spread, slowly at first, then faster. People who had once celebrated Kweku's wealth now celebrated something different: his presence, his humility, the way he sat with old women and listened to their stories, the way he played with children in the dirt, not caring about his clothes, the way he showed up day after day, not as a billionaire, but as a son who had finally come home. Journalists occasionally found him. They wanted to write stories about his comeback, but Kweku always refused interviews. I'm not making a comeback, he would say. I'm making amends. Every morning before the day began, he would sit beneath the mango tree. He would read his mother's letter, carefully unfolding it from the plastic sleeve he kept it in. He would hold those rusty coins in his palm and he would whisper, thank you, Mama. Thank you for never giving up on me. Years passed. Adisa's legacy grew. More scholarships were awarded. More mothers received care. More children learned to read. And Kweku, he never became a billionaire again. He never wanted to. He lived simply in the rebuilt hut, eating the same food as his neighbors, walking the same dusty roads he had once fled. People who had known him in his former life sometimes visited out of curiosity. They would find him teaching math to a group of children under the shade of the mango tree, or helping an old woman carry water, or sitting on the ground eating pounded yam with his fingers. Aren't you bored? One former business associate asked. Don't you miss the excitement, the power, the success? Kweku smiled. I was successful for 10 years and I never slept peacefully once. Now I sleep like a baby. Tell me, which life is more successful? Sometimes when the wind blew through the mango leaves, it made a sound like soft laughter. The villagers said it was Adisa's spirit finally at rest. Kweku believed them. He could feel her presence in everything, in the children's laughter, in the grateful tears of a mother whose daughter just won a scholarship, in the quiet satisfaction of a day spent doing something meaningful. He had lost his fortune, but he had found his soul. One evening, about 5 years after Kweku's return, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, a young man appeared at the village entrance. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-twenties, with a worn backpack and clothes that had seen better days. But there was something about his face, something that made the villagers stop and stare. He asked for directions to Adisa's old hut. The children ran ahead to tell Kweku he had a visitor. When Kweku emerged from the hut, he froze. The young man stood there, nervous, his hands fidgeting with the straps of his backpack. And in that moment, Kweku saw it. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same high cheekbones, the same deep set eyes, the same curve of the mouth. It was like looking at a younger version of himself. My name is Kofi, the young man said, his voice barely above a whisper. I I was told to find you. The village head said before he died that he had one more letter. One your mother gave him with strict instructions not to deliver until 5 years after you returned. Kweku's heart began to pound. A letter? Another letter? Kofi reached into his backpack and pulled out a second envelope. This one was even more worn than the first, as if it had been carried and protected for a very long time. The village head gave this to my grandmother on his deathbed. She gave it to me last week, just before she passed. She said it was time. Kweku took the envelope with trembling hands. The handwriting on the outside was his mother's, but firmer, stronger. This letter had been written years earlier, perhaps before she got sick. He opened it slowly. Kofi stood watching, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. My beloved Kweku, if you are reading this, it means you have come home. It means you have found your way back to the mango tree, back to the boy you once were. It means my first letter reached you and my prayers were answered. Now, my son, I must tell you a truth I have carried for 26 years. A truth I kept secret to protect you, but one you must now know, because it is part of your healing. The young man who brings you this letter is named Kofi. He is 26 years old and he is your brother. Kweku's vision blurred. He had to steady himself against the tree. He looked up at Kofi, who was watching him with tears streaming down his face. The letter continued. Your father, may God rest his soul, had a brief relationship before we married. It resulted in a child, Kofi's mother. When she died in childbirth, your father begged me to take the baby. I was young and hot, but when I looked into that infant's eyes, I saw innocence. I saw a child who had done nothing wrong. I raised him for the first 3 years of his life, but then your father died, and I knew I could not keep both of you and give you the future you deserved. The choice I made still haunts me. I had to choose. I sent Kofi to live with my sister in a distant village. I sent what money I could, when I could, but I poured everything else into you, my visible son, my public legacy. But Kofi never forgot me, and when I grew sick, when you were too busy to come, it was Kofi who appeared at my doorstep. He had tracked me down after all those years. He came with no bitterness, no anger. He simply said, Mother, let me care for you now. And he did, my son. For the last 6 months of my life, Kofi was there. He bathed me when I could not bathe myself. He fed me when my hand shook too much to hold a spoon. He read to me from the Bible. He held my hand in the dark hours when I was afraid. He asked for nothing. He knew you existed. I told him everything. And do you know what he said? He said, "My brother must be doing important things. I understand why he cannot come. I will be here for both of us." Before I died, I made Kofi promise not to contact you immediately. I told him you needed time to find yourself first, time to discover what truly matters. I told him that only when you had been tested, only when you had lost everything and chosen to return anyway, would you be ready to meet him. Kweku, my son, you are not my only legacy. Kofi is your brother. He has nothing, no education beyond primary school, no wealth, no connections. He has worked as a laborer all his life to survive. But he has something you once lost. He knows what matters. He understands love and sacrifice and loyalty. I ask you now, as my final wish, take care of him, not with money alone, but with love. Learn from him as he learns from you. You are both my sons, and my spirit will only rest when you become the brothers you were meant to be. The boy who cared for me in my last days is your blood. Show him the same grace he showed me. Show him the grace you wish someone had shown you. Bind your wounds together, build something beautiful together, and know that from wherever I watch, I am finally, truly at peace. Your mother, Adisa. Disappears. Kofi has a gift. Ask him to sing for you. When you hear his voice, you will understand that talent and destiny run in our family, regardless of opportunity. Give him the chance I could not. Kweku slowly folded the letter. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He looked up at Kofi, this stranger who was not a stranger, this brother he never knew existed. Kofi's face was wet with tears. "I don't want anything from you," he said quickly. I wanted you to know the truth. Mama made me promise to deliver this letter. Now that I have, I can. Wait, Kweku's voice cracked. "Don't go." He took a step forward, then another, and then, before he could think about it, before he could let pride or shame or confusion stop him, he wrapped his arms around Kofi and held him tight. "I'm sorry," Kweku whispered. "I'm so sorry you were alone. I'm sorry she had to choose. I'm sorry I wasn't there when she needed us both." Kofi hugged him back, his body shaking with sobs. "She loved you so much," he said. "Every day, even when she was in pain, she would tell me stories about you, about how smart you were, how kind you used to be, how you would change the world. She told me about you too," Kofi continued. "In those last days, she said you were lost, but that you would find your way home. She never stopped believing in you. Never." The two brothers stood there beneath the mango tree as the sun set, holding each other like men who had been drowning and had just found solid ground. When they finally pulled apart, Kweku looked into his brother's eyes and said, "She wrote that you have a gift, that you can sing." Kofi looked embarrassed. "It's nothing, just something I do when I'm working. It helps pass the time." "Sing for me," Kweku said. "Please, it's what Mama wanted." And so, as night fell and the stars began to appear, Kofi sang. His voice rose clear and powerful into the evening air, a voice that spoke of sorrow and hope, of pain transformed into beauty. It was the kind of voice that made you stop and listen, that made you remember every important thing you'd ever forgotten. The villagers, hearing the music, came out of their homes. They gathered around the mango tree, drawn by the haunting melody. Some began to cry, others smiled and swayed, and Kweku stood there, watching this brother he never knew, and felt something break open in his chest, not with pain this time, but with possibility. When the song ended, silence hung in the air like a blessing. You could have been famous, Kweku said softly. With a voice like that, Kofi shrugged. Maybe, but I never had a chance to find out. No money for training, no connections, just a voice and empty pockets. Kweku took his brother's hand. Mama asked me to take care of you, not with money alone, but with love. She asked us to build something together. He paused, looking around at the gathered villagers, at the rebuilt hut, at the mango tree that had witnessed every chapter of this story. I spent years building an empire for myself. Kweku continued. It all collapsed. But this, he gestured to the school, the clinic, the library. This is still standing. Because it wasn't built for me. It was built for us, for everyone. He turned back to Kofi. Stay, please. Help me build Mama's true legacy. We'll expand the school. Add a music program you can teach. We'll create opportunities for kids like you, like us, who have talent but no chance to use it. We'll do it together as brothers, the way we should have done from the beginning. Kofi's eyes widened. But I don't know anything about running programs, or and I didn't know anything about building when I came back here. Kweku interrupted with a smile. But I learned. We learned together. That's what family does. Kofi nodded, unable to speak. He simply opened his arms, and the two brothers embraced again, this time not in grief, but in hope. 10 years later, the village had been transformed. Adisa's legacy had grown into a full school with a renowned music program. Students came from all over the country to study there. Kofi had become a celebrated voice teacher, and several of his students had gone on to successful careers in music and theater. Kweku and Kofi ran the organization together. Where Kweku had business sense and strategic thinking, Kofi had empathy and artistic vision. Together, they were unstoppable. The brothers lived side by side in two simple homes near the mango tree. They took meals together, made decisions together, and raised their children together. Kweku had finally married a teacher from the village who loved him for who he was, not what he had. Kofi had married too, a nurse who worked at the clinic. On the 10th anniversary of Kweku's return, they held a celebration under the mango tree. Hundreds of people gathered, students whose lives had been changed, mothers whose children had received medical care, villagers who had watched the transformation happen one day at a time. As the sun began to set, Kweku stood to speak. Beside him was Kofi, and around them were their children, cousins who played together and loved each other without the burden of secrets and separation. 10 years ago, Kweku began, his voice strong but gentle. I came back to this village with nothing. I had lost everything I thought mattered: money, status, power. But I had gained something I didn't know I was missing: the truth about what makes a life worth living. He pulled out his mother's letters, both of them, now preserved in protective sleeves. My mother wrote me two letters. The first taught me about forgiveness and the importance of returning to your roots. The second taught me about family and the power of second chances. He looked at Kofi, who smiled back at him with tears in his eyes. She gave me a brother I didn't know I had. And through that brother, she gave me the final piece of the puzzle. We are not meant to walk this life alone. We are meant to lift each other up. The crowd erupted in applause. Children cheered. Women ululated in the traditional way. And somewhere in the branches of the mango tree, leaves rustled in a wind that felt almost like a caress. That night, after everyone had gone home, Kweku and Kofi sat beneath the tree, watching the stars. Do you think she can see us? Kofi asked quietly. I know she can, Kweku replied, and I think she's finally at peace. Do you ever regret it? Kofi asked, giving up the billionaire life? The mansions and the fame? Kweku was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes and lit up his face. I had everything, he said, and I was miserable. Now I have enough, and I'm happy. That's not a trade. That's a miracle. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth pouch that contained his mother's coins. He did this every night, a ritual of remembrance. These coins, he said, holding them up to catch the moonlight, are worth nothing in the market, but to me, they are priceless. They remind me of what real wealth is: a mother's love, a brother's loyalty, a second chance to get it right. Kofi placed his hand on Kweku's shoulder. She would be so proud of you. Of us. We are proud of each other, Kweku said. That's what she wanted most. Not for us to be rich or famous, just for us to be whole. The two brothers sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have walked through fire together and emerged on the other side. And in that silence, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear a woman's voice carried on the wind, soft, gentle, satisfied. My sons, my beautiful sons, you found your way home. So this is how the story ends, or rather, how it truly begins, with two brothers beneath a mango tree, building something that will outlast them both, with children learning to read and sing and dream, with a village transformed not by one man's wealth, but by one man's choice to return and rebuild. The tale of Kweku teaches us that success without substance is just noise, that you can gain the whole world and lose your own soul, that the people who sacrifice for us deserve more than our money. They deserve our presence, our time, our love. But it also teaches us something more hopeful. It's never too late to come home, never too late to make amends, never too late to discover that what you've been searching for was waiting where you started all along. Adisa's wisdom lives on in every child who receives a scholarship, in every mother who receives care, in every student who learns that their voice matters. But most of all, it lives on in the relationship between two brothers who might have been strangers but chose instead to be family. So ask yourself, what have you abandoned in your pursuit of success? Who have you left behind on your climb to the top? And what letters are waiting for you, unread, unopened, that might change everything? Because in the end, we all have a mango tree somewhere, a place where our roots go deep, a person whose love shaped us, a truth we've been running from. And the only question that matters is, will you have the courage to go back and dig? If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you need to call, someone you need to visit, someone you need to thank, don't wait. Don't make Kweku's mistake. Don't let time steal what love has given, because a mother's love never dies. You can abandon her body, but her spirit will always find a way to reach you. And when it does, will you be ready to receive it? The riches of the world mean nothing if the soul remains poor. Go home while there's still time.